Hey, how you doing today? It's been a while since I did one of these, so let me just jump right into it and introduce the latest book that I had actually finished on my shelf. Today is some day in the month. It's like January 15th. It is Sunday the 15th, 2023, first book of the new year. So, let's we're doing something a little bit different today. Um, I toyed with the idea whether to do this or not, but we are going to talk about the Cocoon Conundrum. Now, originally when I started doing this, I was pretty much promoting books that I've read or that I've liked. And these are the things that I'm kind of putting out there saying, hey, you know something? I think more people should read this. Give it a shot. And then I kind of didn't want to go too far back into the past of things I had read before. I wanted to keep it a little contemporary from the purposes of what I'm actually reading now. So, this one hit the list, and it's coming to you now. The good thing is, this is just me and just my opinion. I don't belong to another higher corporate sponsor. I don't have another umbrella company above me. There's no company message. My reason for doing this isn't to attack the latest craze. You know, everyone seems to be on whatever the current show is or the current book is. I'm going to tell you why it's the worst one ever. So, you want those kind of opinions? I say go ahead, sign in to Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson or maybe even Alex Jones. Here, I'm just going to give you my opinion on things I've read. Very nice, to the point. Um, and the original message of things I've liked is now just on whatever I have on my plate right now that I've finished. So, this one is Sherrie Rose is the author, and she has The Cocoon Conundrum, breaking out of isolation into liberty. Also kind of subtitled The Unexpected Odyssey. Okay. Uh, what is this book? Oh, almost like a self-help book. And self-help books can be very useful for yourself. But she talks about a lot even in the foreword, saying, listen, I wrote this during COVID, and I was originally going to even call it the COVID Conundrum, but then again, you know, if you do such a thing, people might just not want to read the latest book about COVID. They might not want to say, you know something, you know, this is what COVID did to you, whatever, you go do that, I'm going to go do my thing, whatever else. But then she realized, you know something, while we were in lockdown during COVID, this didn't require that to be the impetus of what might be a personal problem, so that you can then take it and then, as she calls it, liberate yourself and become a better you or a better version of yourself, unlocking your own potential kind of a thing. So, again, what is it? COVID had your lockdowns. And what happened during the lockdowns? People stagnated. You constantly were hearing about death. Morbid stories were coming left, right, and center. People are losing people. People know people who are losing people. If you happen to have gone on one of those Zoom sessions, people always said, oh yeah, my neighbor got it and he's no longer here, or 3 people in my office are now gone, and it was pretty much what anyone ever talked about. It was so present and so prevalent for everyone. And one of the things that happened was some people had to-do lists, and now during this period, to-do became, maybe someday, maybe some other day. Even though you knew that you were going to be locked down for a couple months, you didn't think it was going to be a year or two, unfortunately. So, people got into a funk. And that funk became ever prevalent and stayed with people for a lot longer. There is some talk here as well, but it does happen. There are some people who's like, oh, COVID was fantastic. And during COVID, I was able to accomplish A, B, C, D, and E. I never knew I had that much time available to myself. And it's like, well, you didn't win COVID. You just kind of did something you should have been doing. Personally, if I thought it was going to be a year or two, I would have done a body health thing. I would have been so much lesser than I look like right now because I would have taken advantage of it. But no, I kind of partied. So, that's how it goes. Now, the first part of this book does talk a lot about like, hey, this is COVID, this is lockdown, this is what happens to people, boom. And then the second half of the book talks about transitioning. It's almost like a how-to, It takes some good visual techniques that have been uncovered by some other thought-minded intellectuals and finds a way to put them in a certain order, saying if you want to like identify things in your life that you think might be ruts or think you might have other obstacles or hurdles, this is how you can do it. And then you can kind of get the ball rolling from there. Almost like one of those things where the first acknowledgement of a problem is saying, I got a problem. That wasn't the right word, but you got to say there is a problem in order to identify it more concretely, and then you can work forward with it. Think more like a Marie Kondo for your motivation and your ability to see your own abilities. So that's what the book is about. Now, I took other things out of the book, which kind of put it low on my happiness level. But I was always told if you're going to say something bad, you should always say something good first. And it's probably a good thing, just to get into the habit, whatever else. But let's talk about a couple good things first. Sherrie Rose had done this, and she dedicated it to a good friend of hers, and his name is Kevin, and talks very highly of Kevin. Very strong feelings about such a positive thing that this person did for other people and what he put out into the world. Okay? Unfortunately, she lost him during COVID. So it is one of those stories saying like, oh my God, this is COVID, look what happens. And this hit me very close because this happened to a very close person of mine. One of those, hey, a bright spark has been lost and extinguished in the world type of dedications. So, and you know something? Very admirable. You take any motivation you can to get what you have in front of you and your knowledge in your mind from this step to the next step isn't the worst thing in the world, even when it happens to be someone else's death. Even in their death, motivated you to become an author and get things from your mind shared out into the world. And, kudos. Bottom line. I listen to motivational speakers every now and again, and Les Brown had once said, you know something? The best ideas in the world you can all find in the graveyard right now. It's the potential and ideas that never came out of people and got shared with the world. Well, Sherrie's did. So people can then read this and take it for what it is. Another on the list of accomplishments I'll say is she did write a book. I personally would love to write a book one day. You know something? I never sit down to do it. And I'm not even sitting there saying, who has the time? I spend my time on other endeavors and some things like this. This is more important to me than actually sitting and writing a book. So that's what I do. This is what she did. And some people do say, writing a book, that's easy. Anyone could do that. It's just getting published out there. I was like, well, yeah, you know something? Give credit, and a lot more credit than that, to people who actually do publish something, even if it's self-published. Sure, anyone can type a bunch of sentences, but to put it together, make it coherent, make complete thoughts, focus it on one narrow item and go from A to B to C to D, that's not easy. In fact, it was funny. One day I was actually sitting on a hospital bed kind of a thing. I used to donate platelets pretty often, almost every weekend, and always reading there too, because I just am a voracious reader. And I was reading a book I have here. It was 2015 Writer's Market. Okay, it was an older edition, but I'm sure there's things in here that were still prevalent, in 2020, that they were back in 2015. So I'm sitting there, and one of the, what do they call them? One of the technicians that are there, the phlebotomists actually were there, and he was chatting with me because, once they hook all the people up to the machines, they just wander back and forth waiting for them to beep off and fix a problem or disconnect somebody. So he goes, you're looking to write a book. He goes, I wrote a book once. Yeah, my friends wouldn't think I would ever be able to do it, but I just sat down one day and one weekend, boom, I wrote a book. And, in my mind, I was like, I probably did tell him. I was like, congratulations. But this book isn't about writing a book. This book's about getting published after you've written a book. Because that's a harder process than actually writing a book. And unfortunately, he was kind of a little dejected by that. I wasn't trying to one-up him or anything, but he walked away, but that's the whole thing. People, and you can say anyone can write a book, and I'm not trying to be ratatouille over here saying anyone can cook, but yes, you can write a book, but to be something that someone else wants to read, that's a different story altogether. So, the last thing I'll say on those kind of topics is this will help people that maybe have found themselves into some kind of rut during isolation, or maybe they had some kind of isolation even before that for some other reason. Maybe they graduated college with a certain degree and now they couldn't find a job in that field or anything even remotely close to start getting their CV together. And now they got to try to find something else in life. Well, they might not be able to, and they'll just work, on a retail job or some food service industry, something that only just pays by hour and it's not maybe a career, but it's just something to pay bills until something comes along. They can read this book and probably get from where they are to where they could be. Some people might use something like this as their stepping stone. And then once, that snowball starts coming off the snowy mountain, it gets bigger and bigger, and now it's a boulder, and now it's the size of a house. That could happen to people too. This could be a stepping stone, or this could be something they full on embrace and helps them get completely out of their funk and forward into something that they want better. So those are the good things I will say about this book. And then the other question comes up is like, why even read it? So I think it was on LinkedIn one day. I saw this article that popped across my feed for some reason. I think it might have been, a connection of a connection saying, hey everyone, this book's available for free on Amazon through your Kindle this one day only in January of 2022. And I saw it, I was like, yeah, free book. Might as well. And I wrote it on my calendar. I put it on my calendar on my phone. And sure enough, one day, it popped off. I was like, oh, good, there it is. And I went, downloaded it on my phone. Boom, now I have the Kindle edition. Brand new book, just got out there, and I have it there. And granted, I understand you can get free books galore everywhere. But I was like, whatever. At my fingertips, let's go for it. Now, here it is a year later. I was like, something? I think I have that one book on my Kindle on my phone. I know I don't generally use e-readers, but I know it's there. So here I was just going to start donating plasma. So I said, instead of bringing a book, because all the books I wanted to read now that are on my list, they're kind of larger and they're bulky. And if I have one arm hooked up to a machine and can only read with the one arm, sometimes the book might get a little bit too heavy. So I was like, let me go through my e-reader and go through that. Boom. I'm going to be at least 2 sessions this weekend trying to donate plasma, and I'll go from there. Good book to read while you're on a blood machine. Incidentally, I went there today. I still got the bandage on, covering up the hole in my vein as they took my plasma earlier. So, and I did. I actually read this book over the course of 2 sessions. So it was like a 2, maybe 3 hour read. And I think it might help a little bit that I skipped an entire chapter, but I'll come back to that later on. So, there it was. Got this book. Let's see what I got to do. Boom, go on board. So, start reading it, and I'm reading it in the waiting room, and I go in to the machine, answer the questions, take care of everything. They hook me up. Now I got my phone in front of me, and I'm reading it. And a very nice, almost like a quick read, almost like a beach read, if you will. Very conversational in his technique. And there's a whole bunch of anecdotes up front where this is life before COVID, and this is what she was doing. She's on some kind of like touring circuit, visiting a bunch of friends. Hey, something, we're going to get together, maybe even have a birthday party for mom. Okay, no problem. Boom, do all this kind of stuff. And you're going along, it's almost like nice day type of stories, A nice soft read, not a problem. And that's when I started noticing things. So now I'm getting taken out of the narrative and actually seeing the writing. And the first thing I noticed was I'm about 40 pages into the book, and it's been like 2, maybe 3 anecdotes already. So now I'm looking at this thing, and I'm like, it's only 187 pages tops to begin with. And that includes a bunch of, credits on the beginning and the end. So it's a 180-page book. 40 of them are already done, and we haven't gotten anywhere yet. I know it might be heartfelt And it might be the kind of thing where you might feel sympathy towards something, or towards her, or you might think, oh, I've gone through the same thing, and therefore you have your empathy gene kicking in forth. But it's just like, it's taking up a lot of real estate doing this. And unfortunately, there are times when I actually watch maybe even a TV show and notice the same thing. If I'm watching a sitcom that's 22 minutes long, not including commercials, and you realize that they're taking so much time on this one detail of one story, you're like, you're going to end soon. I hope you're going to do something more funny. That might even happen in the longer drama shows. You get 45 minutes on the screen, give or take, and they're spending an awful long time on, the detective is looking at a piece of thread and trying to like match it with a whole bunch of other things, and it takes the majority of the episode. That better be a very important piece of thread later on. It better have a lot to do with the villain or the person who did the murder or whatever it might be. Otherwise, yeah, you're a very good and thorough detective, but the thread's got to mean something. And that's what was happening here. And besides the anecdotes, all of a sudden they were like just landscapes of pages taken over, defining words and tearing apart their etymology to make them sound a lot more momentous than they originally were. Words like gratitude or journey. It originally came from France, meaning that, and that's the first part of the root, and that means that. And if we break them separately, when you do this, and then you can do that, then you can accomplish, and pop up. It's like, wow, now we're on page 60, and what the hell's going on here? Now, also in these anecdotes, the way she's trying to tell stories, a lot of pages were torn up summarizing movies to make a point. I mean, you get to hear about Back to the Future, Groundhog Day, Interstellar, James Bond's Time to Die, and there's some others in there too. And it's like, okay, show me what you need to show me. A lot of these things just, again, I was being taken out of the story. Now, after I went through the majority of those, I'll get back to the dedication now. So the dedication, like I said, someone close to her made it in his honor. Probably a lot of the good things this person put out in the world she might be using in this book, or it might be helping her get from whatever level she was to the level she wants to be at, or deserves to be at, or needs to be at, or on the road even to get past and surpass that to a higher one. Okay? Then you come to a whole chapter, and this is a chapter I practically skipped, called Letters to Kevin. And it was a bunch of people put in a bunch of letters telling how great a person this was, how much they meant to them, how their life was at a low point, and this person just being there and being the great person they are helped them get somewhere else. And some people were like, you know something, I had a problem, and he like said 2 words, and all of a sudden, boom, I'm past that problem. And I read like 2 or 3 of these, and I'm like, how many more are left in there? And I saw the book, 30 pages. 30 pages of a 100-page book is all letters that other people wrote about this one person. That's a sixth of your book. That is tremendous real estate. So, and this is one of those things where now I'm looking at your movie quotes, your anecdotes, your letters. How much are you adding to this? Or is it just the fact that you put things in a certain order that become what you're writing and why people should be reading this? I mean, some people dedicate work towards another, towards a loved one, towards another star that they used to work with or a friend. That's fine. But there are times that a dedication can go in another direction. Examples of that, look at Sean Combs or P. Diddy or whatever iteration he's on now. Look at David Spade. They made careers out of dedications. So, dedications are fantastic, but when it becomes so much of the meat, then again, you're pulling me out of this one. And on top of having all these, summaries of movies and whatever else, you should see how much time is spent on quotes. Heavy, heavy, heavy on quotes. So much quotes, I'm assuming you're going to fill up a third of this book. So take that with the letters and all the movie summaries of the 180 pages. What do we got left here? Like 40? It's a lot of tell and not much show. And writers are supposed to do show, not tell. Now, it's possible that this is more of a novel writing concept, but, it's don't just keep pointing to things all the time and go from it. And on top of which, by the way, a lot of the movies that were even referenced in this were all contemporary movies. It almost reminds me, I loved watching The Newsroom, and towards the end of the third season, Neil Sampat comes in, and he had just made the, internet part of the news a thing, and now it's under a corporate kind of umbrella, and now they're like just shitting on things constantly. And the people were like, these are the 9 most overrated movies of all time. And as he's looking at him, he goes, 9 overrated movies of all time. Overrated. Why are we just shitting on things? And by the way, the oldest movie you have on the list was The Matrix from like 14 years ago. And then you put the balance scale saying, of all time, 14 years. Not quite the same. So the fact that a lot of these movies are actually for, contemporary movies, a lot of the movie references are for contemporary movies, it kind of says that some of this is going for the core audience of a young audience. And while a lot of people were isolated during COVID, the young audiences were not the ones that you should be actually trying to help out there. It's the elderly that had the biggest problem there. Not the 20-something iGens that have every internet resource known to man and are annoyed that they can't call up and get some avocado toast that comes in fresh. The elderly needed more help, and that's where this would actually really come into play if it was done in that direction. I'm sorry about that. I kind of went somewhere in my mind. But, I said again, like I was saying, this was just taking me out of the story. So, the question is then, hey Joe, you know something? You're reading this, you're not liking it, why don't you just put it down? 2 reasons. Number 1, I don't put down books once I start them. Not to mention, at the time, I was kind of hooked up to a plug machine there. I had nowhere to go, and I didn't want to just surf the internet for a while, so I'm going to keep reading this thing on through and read it to the end. Side note is, I did put down a book once in my life. I had put down The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. I am not going to try to say his first name. I always butcher it and always get it wrong. But that one I couldn't follow whatever else. But I will say at the time, I think I was 14. Kind of commendable I even picked it up, and it wasn't required reading at school. But good caveat to that story was about a decade later, I went through kind of a classics phase, and I picked it up again. And I read the whole thing through. Even if it was out of spite, I read the whole thing through, but I liked it. It was fantastic. Hell, the same thing happened to me when I was young the first time I read Moby Dick. Couldn't snore through that more. But you know something? Later on, picked it up. Now I love it. It's easily a top 20 book. Who knows? 10 years from now, maybe I pick up the Cocoon Conundrum and do the same thing. One of the last things I'll mention, though, is, and it really got me. So now I'm already out of the story, but I'm reading it through, and it come to a part where all of a sudden she starts talking about the Pareto principle. And this is something I've been hearing a lot recently. I think Jordan Peterson mentions a lot also, as a means of saying, oh, this is kind of what happens in our society in general. And I'm not saying just the society, like any subdivision or sub-hierarchy of anything, you can look at this and this happens. Now, the way she defined it was 80% of your outcomes come because of 20% of your effort. So trying to refocus you and your abilities to spend more time doing the right things and making that 20% of your effort to go through that most important thing in your life, and now you'll achieve more in life because you've achieved 80% of you. Okay? No. The Pareto principle is not individualistic. It was originally, and again, it's not even a law, it's the kind of thing that is an observation of the world. And the observation initially was done in relation to economics and wealth. I think initially it was all about land in Italy. But the real meaning is 80% of consequences come from only 20% of causes among a population. The most important part of that, too. Meaning 80% of the wealth in this world is only owned by 20% of the people. 80% of the land in Italy at one time was only owned by 20% of the populace of Italy. That's where the principle became a thing. You might even put this into regular work, saying 20% of the people in your employ do 80% of the work. So when people have like layoffs, whatever else, they try to get rid of some of that 80%, and people say, oh no, it's corporate greed. But that's the whole thing. Took that principle, tried to apply it to an individual, and it doesn't work that way. So not only was I getting out, I'm out. Now I'm anti. And I was like, come on. The last thing I'll say is, and I understand why it was done. So she uses a brand new word that she puts it into the book. And we'll talk about this principle. I'll just call it the E word because I am not going to say it out loud. She has the E word. And the E word, and you want to become the E word, and let me tell you the derivation of the E word, and we'll break it apart, and it's actually made up of 4 words, kind of jumbled together to one long word. No. I understand if you're going to write a self-help book, sometimes you have to do something to make you branch out, to make it something that people will remember, that they'll make a part of themselves and a part of their effort and move forward. And then when you are talking to anybody else one day, you're like, hey, you're talking about the E word. I E word all the time. Bah, 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 bah. This is like, what was it? The Secret? The Positive Thinking? If that's going to be your self-help book, you start talking about positive thinking to other people in a group, some of those people will be like, I know what you're talking about, and it worked for me, and I saw it worked for my husband, and blah, 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 whatever else. But she came up with her E word, and I was like, oh, Jesus Christ, really? So, that's all I'm going to have for today. Again, I got this free from Kindle. It was probably part of a push to get the word out about the product, which is actually a good push. You know, from a marketing perspective, that's fantastic. Because put it this way, if I read this and loved it, you'd be hearing all about that now, and then it would go on further. Even though I'm more of a physical book kind of guy. I mean, I can do e-readers, I can do Kindles, but I do prefer to have, like, physical books in front of me and move from there. But it was part of a free push for a Kindle, and let's just say, for my own purposes, it wasn't worth the price that I paid for it for me to read. Okay? I'm going to wrap up here now before everyone gets home and I start having some extra volume and noises in the background. But in the meantime, if this was something you found useful, let me know about it. If there's something you didn't like, if I went over the line, let me know about it. Let me know if I kind of did something bad here. You know, and I can hear from a different perspective how things work in the world. Okay? Otherwise, happy reading. Enjoy. Take care.